Okay, all right. Good evening, everyone. All right, so still working on really commenting on Dalai Lama's commentary on the that first complete translation of the Tibetan Book of the Dead by Matthew Kapstein. Um, I forgot his Tibetan name, Garib Dorje, maybe? I'm not sure. Can't remember. Matthew Kapstein, anyway. But I thought I'd say something about that too, because this Tibetan Book of the Dead, again, is this teaching on instruction on the six bardos, these six gaps, these six ways that we find ourselves, kind of like fundamental experiences that we find ourselves with, situations, you might say. For instance, our living, awake state, what we're all experiencing, running around like we do, is one of those bardos. Um, the moment of death is a bardo. The moment that we arise out of the unconsciousness of death is a bardo. The state between this arising and being reborn is a bardo. Typically, when they say bardo, people are talking about that one. I think it's Sidpa Bardo. And that's primarily what the Tibetan Book of the Dead is talking about. It's a guide. It gives you instructions so you know how to get the most out of that experience, so to speak. But then there's also the bardo of the dream, when we're in a dream state, um, and then also in meditation. The different meditative states are all considered a bardo, not our ordinary waking mind state. Um, it's such a profound topic, and it's very tantric. I mean, traditionally, these teachings were secret, not secret in the sense that you don't get to know, but secret in the sense that people's understanding kind of clouded their mind to even being able to accept this different view. And of course, because mind is the king, one who can adopt a different view, it's a higher view, you get a higher realization, you might say. The teachings that's given on the Tantra, and why do we spend time with it at all, given kind of the limited resources that we have? When you hear Garinpoche talking about one of his teachers, Chime Dorje, spending 13 years on retreat on the six yogas of Naropa. Again, these six yogas are tantric methods of Mahamudra, tantric methods of realization, and utilizing each of these bardo gaps. So, for instance, there's a dream yoga using the dream state. There's Tumo, this bodily heat yoga that uses the waking state. All sorts of direct correspondences to whatever kind of status our mind is in. Um, so why? I mean, he spent 13 years on these, and extreme level of teachings before that. In other words, it's said that the sutric methods lead you to great compassion, and the tantric methods lead you to great wisdom. They're two wings of the same bird. You can't do one without the other, so to speak. But nonetheless, very rare these days to have the length of training that traditionally was done. And of course, that length of training prevented certain kinds of errors and complications and obstacles. We had one Lama here, when they teach on the Nundro teachings, the teachings, it means go before. They're the ones that people have often heard of, 100,000 prostrations, 100,000 accumulations of very elaborate mandala offering, 100,000 repetitions of this great purification mantra of Vajrasattva, 100,000 Guru Yoga prayers. It's a survey of the entire Buddhist path, including refuge and bodhicitta, great motivations. But it starts out, that's all describing what's called the inner Nundro. Typically, you would do that before being introduced to the higher tantric teachings. That's called the inner nundro. The outer nundro is also called the four thoughts that turn the mind to Dharma. So the recognition and the study of the precious human life, this incredible opportunity that we have, and the incredible powers and endowments that we have as a human being, then the impermanence, really thinking deeply about impermanence and realizing this situation doesn't last. And then cause and effect, knowing that what we do matters, that virtue results in happiness and progress on the path, and non-virtue creates obstacles. Then the suffering nature of samsara, so we're thoroughly, imbued with basically the Buddha's first noble truth, that this unenlightened existence is inherently dissatisfactory. But of course, it's not the whole study. And so that understanding, though, that first noble truth, leads naturally to refuge. We seek refuge from this imperfect kind of situation. So the Nundro teachings, one Lama said those four thoughts that turn the mind to Dharma, that you should spend 6 months just meditating on those. Traditionally, that's the kind of attitude that they took. And yet here we are, we read a book or just stumble into a Dharma center. We somehow come in contact with a teacher, and we're moved, something resonates for us. And yet, like someone said, we're all kept so busy. It's just our way. But nonetheless, so I want to say a little bit about the Tantra itself, because it's the core of this Tibetan Book of the Dead. And it's this special view, this special method. And that's why it seems foreign to many people. They hear about Buddhism, they're interested. Loving kindness and compassion sounds really good. Meditation sounds good. Calming the mind, training of the mind, development of the character, giving meaning to one's life, getting meaning out of this saha world, this world of patient endurance. All of that sounds pretty good. But the Tantra itself starts to sound kind of like unbelievable. And why? So first, from Gar Rinpoche, I read something, I think it was Tuesday night. It was Garchen Rinpoche, discussing Guru Yoga. As I mentioned, it said that there are 3 ways to Buddhahood, 3 great paths, you might say. One is purification. If we just eliminate all our negativity, all of our self-grasping, all of the resulting negative mind states, if we stop acting out of those, but rather are purifying them, not feeding them, eventually you get to Buddhahood. Mind is perfectly purified, and in its natural state, that is Buddha. The second way is the accumulation of merit. If you are just developing the positives to the nth degree, the same thing, you end up in Buddhahood. Usually these two are together. They're said one method in the way that they categorize them, but purification and accumulation of merit. But the third way is rather unique to Tantric Buddhism, and that is Guru Yoga. And this is the direct recognition, transmission of your Buddha nature mind from the Lama to you. And why you? Because we see everything right now in our samsaric way as an outer form. We project this world. And so paradoxically, the way to experience directly your Buddha nature is through seemingly an outer projection. At least it appears that way at first. So the whole purpose of the outer Lama is for you to realize your inner Lama. But it's just skillful means. And everything the Buddha did was skillful means. So Rinpoche, Gar Rinpoche, talking about Guru Yoga in his book on Vajrakalaya teachings, there was something that I read that I wanted to repeat. He says gurus are referred to as the noble Sangha because they cultivate the altruistic mind based on impartial love for all sentient beings. By practicing patience, they respond to obstacles with equanimity, as is taught in the 37 practices of bodhisattvas. Since bodhicitta is the basis for finally attaining the status of the Buddhas, one must protect and preserve it at all costs. In the context of both Mahamudra and Dzogchen, it is said that all attributes are brought together in the mind of the Guru. Since there is no yidam without the Guru, it is far more beneficial to practice Guru Yoga than to visualize the development stages of the deity. As it is said in many tantras, greater than visualizing 10 million yidam's mandalas is to meditate once upon the Guru. So, to interject a little bit here, this is not a put down of the Tantra and visualization practice. Rather, it's showing you the view with which it should be practiced. In other words, when we visualize, say, Vajrakalaya in the space in front of us, that is the Guru manifesting as that form. And similarly, we visualize ourselves as Vajrakalaya or Tara or whomever. That is the mind of the Guru manifesting. And so in this way, we're unifying with the mind of the Guru, and it's actually a very skillful way of Guru Yoga. Yeah, extremely skillful. Because, you know, the naked just one-to-one sounds so simple, but of course it actually takes great, great, great faith. So all of these techniques, you might say, but they're more than techniques. They're manifestations of the nature of our mind. They're extremely skillful. That's why they're called sacred. You know, it's more than just some appearance. But nonetheless, continuing. So as is said in many tantras, greater than visualizing 10 million yidam's mandalas is to meditate once upon the Guru. If this point is not well grasped, one can give rise to a perverted understanding, thinking, it is so easy to recollect the Guru. I always think of the Guru because I stay near him and can speak to him directly. But this is a mistaken notion. The outer Guru is only the metaphorical Guru. He or she is a Nirmanakaya, an embodied emanation whose body, speech, and mind are manifestations of the Sangha, the true Dharma, and the Buddha. In actual fact, to meditate on the Guru is to recollect the Guru's mind, not his or her form. Thus, the thing to be revealed is the inner, ultimate, actual Guru, who is one's own mind. The essence of one's mind is Buddha nature. Whenever it is seen, one has seen the inner Guru. In this regard, in his instructions on the 4 Kaya Guru Yoga, the 4 bodies of the Buddha, Guru Yoga, known as devotion, the life force yantra, Protector Jigten Sumgön taught that when meditating on the Guru as the Nirmanakaya, one should imagine the Guru in his or her embodied form. When meditating on the Sambhogakaya, one should visualize the Guru as the Yidam. Then, when meditating on the Dharmakaya, one should visualize the Guru as the Hung syllable. This extremely profound instruction illustrates that the inner Guru, the Dharmakaya, is inseparable from the Hung syllable. If this key point of the Guru as the mind's nature is not habituated by meditating again and again, even though one may visualize many deities, they will be lifeless. Every deity's life force is the non-dual union that is emptiness compassion. So what struck me particularly here was this statement of Jigten Sumgön, which I had not heard previously, that when one meditates on the Dharmakaya, one should visualize the Guru as the Hung syllable. Because this shows the special power and non-duality of the Tantra. Because, you know, for most people, if you have like a conceptual understanding, you know, it's like the teaching that you hear of The Nirmanakaya being the raindrops falling in this manifest kind of way that we experience as benefit. The Sambhogakaya being the giant clouds that are up there that have form, but we can't grab onto them, and they emphasize the vastness of space. And then the Dharmakaya being the space. And so importantly, we sometimes miss that key in there is that it's not just empty space. It has quality. It has this color of blue. And so this hung syllable, normally if you try to conceptualize in an abstract way these teachings of Dharmakaya, most people end up with just kind of a void. In fact, that was even the first translation that some of the early translators used for emptiness. And it gives it's wrong. There's a mistake there. The idea that there's actually something, this hung syllable, that is Dharmakaya, it's mind-boggling. Because instead of this idea that somehow something completely opposite of all of this is what we're looking for, there's something right there that we're in touch with now. And because it has form and because we can relate to it, so to speak, it's easier to meditate on than some idea of just some sort of intellectual vastness. It's just mind-boggling because you don't hear that kind of teaching. And yet this is, I'm sure, why Garmache pointed it out, and Jigten Sumgyen is one of the great teachers, although generally not as well known, except Tibetans know. The great figures in the different traditions are shared by all the Tibetans, and Jigten Sumgyen is like that. His famous teaching that the guru is like a snow mountain, and it's the devotion of the disciple that melts the ice on the snow mountain, and then the water flows to you as blessings automatically. I think every Tibetan knows that one. So I wanted to say a little more about the Tantra because it's so fundamental to what is this Tibetan Book of the Dead, all about. Why do we even get into all this esotericism in that? And it's because it's powerful. Dalai Lama says that the tantric teachings were not widely taught, in Buddha Shakyamuni himself didn't teach them widely. It was a different time. There was actually much more sort of spiritual merit and virtue in people. You read the stories of people coming to realizations, just seeing the Buddha, just hearing his teachings, and the remarkable stories and examples of those times. But with time, things degenerate. And it's said that some traditions say that Buddha Shakyamuni returned, so to speak, in the form of Guru Rinpoche in order to teach the Tantra, because the Tantra is the type of practice that's especially effective in times of great degeneration, times when the afflictive emotions are very, very strong and shared by people, times when people think that virtuous practices are actually not cool. Virtuous practices are not really virtuous or whatever, and worse, they think that non-virtuous practices are virtuous. Everything's upside down. The Tibetans believe that this is the time, these last 1,000 years, that we've been in, so they emphasize the Tantra. For us, as really uneducated, speaking for myself, Westerners had no knowledge of any of this at all. And to stumble across it, well, it just seems like, something curious or interesting or colorful or whatever. And yet there are no accidents. You find yourself somehow involved, even in just thinking about it. The ordinary person doesn't even know the word. Never even hears the word Buddha in his whole life. But certainly the Tantra. But then you see, we have the great fortune of seeing people who are trained to some degree, or a great degree, like some of the great lamas in our lives. And then, that quality comes through to you. And then suddenly, well, if they say, why don't you practice this? There must be something to it, that kind of thing. So there's a modicum of faith which allows you to take a step onto the path. And like they say, the Dharma will never let you down. Like one great Zen master said, the Dharma is like the ocean. The farther you go in, the deeper it gets. So I wanted to read, there's a geshe who has written something about this, and I thought I'd read some of this just to get us sort of, deepening our understanding of maybe that technology, so to speak, of it. It says, although Tantra is very popular, not many people understand its real meaning. Some people deny Buddha's tantric teachings, whereas others misuse them for worldly attainment. And many people are confused about the union of sutra and tantra practice, mistakenly believing that sutra and tantra are contradictory. But quoting the Buddha himself, he said you should never abandon highest yoga tantra, but realize that it has inconceivable meaning and is the very essence of the Buddha Dharma. When we understand the real meaning of Tantra, there will be no basis for misusing it, and we shall see that there are no contradictions at all between Sutra and Tantra. Practicing Sutra teachings is the basic foundation for practicing Tantric teachings, and the practice of Tantra is the quick method to fulfill the ultimate goal of Sutra teachings. For example, in his Sutra teachings, Buddha encourages us to abandon attachment. And in Tantra, he encourages us to transform our attachment into the spiritual path. Some people think this is a contradiction, but it is not, because Buddha's tantric instructions on how to transform attachment into a spiritual path are the quick method for abandoning attachment itself. In this way, they are the method to fulfill the aims of sutra teaching. As mentioned, universal compassion accomplished through the practice of sutra teachings, and the wisdom of Tantra accomplished through the practice of tantric teachings are like two wings of a bird. Just as both wings are equally important for a bird to fly, so both Sutra and Tantra are equally important for practitioners seeking enlightenment. Tantra is defined as an inner realization that functions to prevent ordinary appearances and conceptions and to accomplish the four complete purities. So that's key, an inner realization that functions to prevent ordinary appearances and conceptions. Although Buddha's tantric scriptures are sometimes called Tantra because they reveal tantric practices, actual Tantra is necessarily an inner realization that protects living beings from ordinary appearances and conceptions. So the word mantra, means mind protection. And Tantra, I'm told, means body protection. Tantra, secret mantra, and Vajrayana are synonymous. The four complete purities are the pure environment, the body, the enjoyments, and activities of a Buddha. For living beings, the experience of worldly pleasures is the main cause of increasing their attachment, and therefore the main cause of increasing their problems. To stop attachment arising from the experience of worldly pleasures, Buddha taught Tantra as a method to transform worldly pleasures into the path to enlightenment. In accordance with the different levels of transforming worldly pleasures into the path, Buddha taught 4 levels, classes of Tantra: Action Tantra, Performance Tantra, Yoga Tantra, and Highest Yoga Tantra. The first 3 are called the lower Tantras. In Highest Yoga Tantra, Buddha taught the most profound instructions for transforming sexual bliss into the quick path to enlightenment. Since the effectiveness of this practice depends upon gathering and dissolving the inner winds into the central channel through the power of meditation, these instructions were not explained by Buddha in the lower Tantras. In the lower Tantras, Buddha taught instructions on how to transform worldly pleasures other than sexual bliss into the path to enlightenment through imagination, which is a simpler practice of Tantra. So to touch on this a bit, if I remember this correctly, in the lower Tantras, they talk about the level of bliss that's generated. And so in the Tantra, we're writing, these blissful feelings even the bliss that can be generated through these practices. This is why the sutra is so important and motivation is so important. Because someone who's never heard of bodhicitta and somehow gets involved, gets through all the protections and somehow is playing around, you might say, with the Tantra, of course is easily misled by any kind of blissful state. You know, it's like they said that the advantage of our dissatisfactory state is that one good thing Dalai Lama says about suffering is that it kind of leads people into practice. You want to get rid of the suffering. It's such a fundamental motivation and very, very healthy. So that's getting rid of suffering. But when things are going well, we're kind of like in the Deva realm, the God realm. The gods are, because of their virtue, have been born in a very, very wonderful status. But of course, they're just kind of eating the seed corn, They're just riding on the good feelings, not realizing that it's all impermanent and that when they use up their good karma, it's said that, towards the end of their very, very long lives, which are so completely subtle and beautiful, they communicate by gesture or speak in music. I mean, ordinary speech is too gross for the sensual gods. This beautiful and everything is just like heaven. But it's said towards the end of their life, their karma is running out. The flower adornments that they wear start to go bad. Their bodies start to smell, which totally grosses out the other gods. And so they become alone. They experience this suffering of rejection, alienation. And then it's said that because of their enhanced mental powers, which but they've been just kind of like not developing, they're able to see where their next rebirth will be. This is said to be the most intense pain in samsara. So too, when things are going really well, we tend to forget about practice. And it's just wonderful. So Tantra that's why it's so skillful, because it's said the lower Tantras, let me think how they characterize it. The action Tantra utilizes, I think, the bliss of, making eye contact with someone you're in love with. And I think the next one over, the performance Tantra, is the bliss that's generated when he or she smiles back at you. And then the next lower Tantra, the Yoga Tantra, is where there's, I think, actually an embrace. But the highest Yoga Tantra is using the bliss that's on, on the level of, sexual excitation and stuff. So you can see it's much, much more powerful. But those are all just, metaphors. But nonetheless, this ability with these techniques to transform, all our emotions, painful ones too. But it gives you an idea of yeah, you say I'm going to abandon these attachments to all these worldly delights, so to speak. But if you can use those, you can see how it's skillful. But again, and that's why they say dangerous. The gateway through which we enter the Tantra is receiving a tantric empowerment. An empowerment bestows upon us special blessings that heal our mental continuum and awaken our Buddha nature. When we receive a tantric empowerment, we are sowing the special seeds of the 4 bodies of a Buddha upon our mental continuum. These 4 bodies are the nature truth body, the wisdom truth body, the enjoyment body, and the emanation body. So in their Sanskrit terms, maybe these are more familiar, going backwards, the emanation body, Nirmanakaya. The enjoyment body, Sambhogakaya. The wisdom truth body, Dharmakaya. And then the nature truth body, Svabhavivakaya. This is like all 3 together, you might say. At any rate, ordinary beings do not possess more than 1 body, whereas Buddhas possess 4 bodies simultaneously. A Buddha's emanation body is their gross body, which can be seen by ordinary beings. The enjoyment body is their subtle body, which can be seen only by practitioners who have gained higher realizations. And the nature and wisdom truth bodies are their very subtle bodies that only Buddhas themselves can see. In Tantra, the principal objects to be abandoned are ordinary conceptions and ordinary appearances. So when we start with that mantra, that Om at the beginning, when we do these sadhanas, Om Svabhava Shuddha Sarvadharma Shuddha Hang, at that moment we're dropping all of our attachment to ordinary appearances. And it's out of that, what could be called emptiness, that arises the seed syllable of the deity. It all starts from there. So that's the Hung. The terms ordinary conceptions and ordinary appearances are best explained by the following example. Suppose there is a tantric practitioner called John. Normally he sees himself as John, and his environment, enjoyments, body, and mind are John's. These appearances are ordinary appearances. The mind that assents to these ordinary appearances by holding them to be true is ordinary conception. And isn't that the whole freaking world? The appearances we have of an inherently existent I, mine, and other phenomenon are also ordinary appearances. Self-grasping and all other delusions are ordinary conceptions. So we've got ordinary appearances and ordinary conceptions. And that ordinary conception is, that's a powerful one, the alienated I. Ordinary conceptions are obstructions to liberation, and ordinary appearances are obstructions to omniscience. And now you can see when Khenpo's teaching, why all these concepts and everything, why are we analyzing this stuff all the time? Because this is how powerful the mind is. We're living in kind of a space helmet we've put on ourselves. Ordinary conceptions are obstructions to liberation. And ordinary appearances themselves are obstructions to omniscience. In general, all sentient beings, except bodhisattvas who have attained the Vajra-like concentration of the path of meditation, have ordinary appearances. So he's referring here to the Khenpo's taught on the 5 paths, like we say. There's this first path that is the path of accumulation. Every time that we're doing virtuous things, and analyzing in this way and actually doing it in an outer way, giving, patience, all the perfections, we are accumulating. It's kind of like, a reservoir, behind a dam or something is built up this potential power of that water. It's just there, but building it up more and more and more and more and more. Then the second path, and each of these are divided, I don't know how many times, into 3 different levels or more. I can't remember. But after the path of accumulation, then there's the path of application. So now we've got some momentum that we can use. We've got this potential behind this dam, and we can start opening a little sluice in the dam and have some of that water coming out, but in an effective way. Rather than just going every which direction like it does, it's directed. And so this is where we're practicing. We're using the power of our accumulation to meditate, to look into the nature of the mind and all of that. And what that results in is the path of seeing. That's the third path, where there's this profound breakthrough in experience of emptiness. Then that leads to the path of meditation, which he's talking about here. So meditating on this emptiness, these 10 different levels of bodhisattvas. And it's only the very high levels where he said, where we've gotten past ordinary appearances. You see the emptiness of things. You see things in their true nature rather than just the mere appearance, the appearance that's colored and limited by our self-clinging. We're having to filter everything through this idea of ego, even when we're doing it unconsciously. Now, if John were to meditate on the generation stage of a yidam, of a deity, strongly regarding himself as that Buddha, and believing his surroundings experiences, body and mind, to be those of the deity, at that time he would have the divine pride that prevents ordinary conceptions. If he were also to attain clear appearance of himself as the deity, with the environment, enjoyments, body, and mind of the deity, at that time he would have the clear appearance that prevents him from perceiving ordinary experiences. At the beginning, ordinary conceptions are more harmful than ordinary appearances. Ordinary conceptions are more harmful than ordinary appearances. To me, this seems the great hope of the Tantra. Because if somehow you have to attain to some level where you don't see the ordinary appearances anymore, or you're not misled by ordinary appearances, but rather you're seeing them in a pure way. Well, that's a little bit daunting. But conceptions I have right now. And so to be able to work on my conceptions, to me, seems easier. I don't know if I'm right in this. I'm just telling you my sense. At the beginning, ordinary conceptions are more harmful than ordinary appearances. How this is so is illustrated by the following analogy. Suppose a magician conjures up an illusion of a tiger in front of the audience. The tiger appears to both the audience and the magician. But whereas the audience believes that the tiger actually exists and consequently becomes afraid, the magician does not assent to the appearance of the tiger and so remains calm. The problem for the audience is not so much that a tiger appears to them, as is their conception that the tiger actually exists. It is this conception, rather than the mere appearance of the tiger, that causes them to experience fear. If, like the magician, they had no conception that the tiger existed, then even though they still had an appearance of a tiger, they would not be afraid. In the same way, even though things appear to us as ordinary, if we do not conceptually grasp them as ordinary, this will not be so harmful. Similarly, it is less damaging to our spiritual development that our Lama appears to us as ordinary, yet we hold him or her to be an essence of Buddha, than it is for our Lama to appear to us as an ordinary and for us to believe that he or she is ordinary. So we get a little taste here of, like the immediacy of this and the immediacy of the power of mind. How wonderful is that? If you somehow had to see the Lama as, well, we used to have a big tanka of Vajradhara. I don't know anymore. Vajradhara, the holder of the Vajra, this blue figure, which is the Adi Buddha, like the highest Buddha in all the new schools, that is the Geluk, the Sakya, and us, the Kagyu. Vajradhara is blue. That is the Sambhogakaya form, the pure form of Buddha Shakyamuni. So normally, you're taking refuge in the statue of Buddha Shakyamuni, but enlightened Bodhisattva would look at the physical body of Buddha Shakyamuni and see Vajradhara. So that's a little daunting to get to that stage, But at the same time, it's so accessible for me to look at Garchen Rinpoche and say, actually, that's a Buddha. Appearing like an ordinary human being, but I'm convinced to some degree, and that grow more and more and more and more and more. But it's something, what I'm saying, it's something you can do right now. And it's not based on stupidity, it's not pretending. To the degree that you have that, fine. Because you can do so many ways of thinking about this. You just think of the enormity of the moments of your life. How many mind moments? And then you think somehow all these causes and conditions have come together that, we've all come together in this way and in this kind of meaningful way. And so, there's some basis on which it's your experience. It's not just some concept that we're grasping onto. But then again, it's all right to take a concept that's sort of beyond us with the confidence that, maybe I'm headed in that direction. But my point is that it's very practical, down to earth and completely pure, is pure and is completely on the path. It's not a mistaken notion. Because truly, if the Buddha said we are all Buddhas, I can have confidence in that to one degree or another. Nonetheless, the conviction that our Lama is a Buddha, even though he or she may appear to us as an ordinary person, helps our spiritual practice to progress rapidly. To reduce ordinary appearances and conceptions, Buddha taught the Tantra of the generation stage, and then to abandon those two obscurations of conceptions and appearances completely, he taught the Tantra of the completion stage, especially Mahamudra Tantra. By completing our training in these tantras, we shall become a tantric enlightened being with the complete purities of environment, body, enjoyments, and activities of a Buddha. You know, it's like a truth, a wonder that's, you know, it's so great that you can't accept it, you know. There's this phenomenon in human beings, perhaps you've had it too, you know. You can be living next door to some sort of, I don't know, like financial investment expert or something, you know. And yet you get a call from some bucket shop in Brooklyn, got some hot deal for you. You'll believe some guy out of your experience because this is just my ordinary experience, you know. Can't be anything special. It's got to be something out there that I haven't had any experience with. Somebody knows something that I don't know. Uh, it's just hard to believe that we are Buddhas and that our ordinary experience is really profound. We just, you know, it's just kind of funny. Um, and isn't that the way it is? You know, when we visualize ourselves as a Buddha, it's the thought is I mean, the feeling is there, is that here I am visualizing myself as a Buddha. So that's very strong. I mean, we've built this up over lifetimes. But think, we'll get more into it in the future, but think how incredibly skillful this is, because we have this natural kind of, you know, here's an I here. There's some sort of entity here, right? And so wonderful, make that entity a Buddha. And then already you're starting to act in that way, because truthfully, it's like our nature is starting to flower. The lotus is unfolding at a more rapid pace, you might say. This is the path, the resultant path. Like they say, the entire Buddhist world shares the causal path. We practice the causes that will arise as Buddhahood. And in that way, you can see how the tantric path is that too. We're practicing the causes of Buddha. But also there's the resultant path, and that's Guru Yoga. So this is the tantric path with this higher view that we are Buddhas right now. Because then you're practicing the resultant path. So what did the Buddha say? Well, if you practice virtue and all these ethical things and proper understanding, all the stuff that we do, you know, you will arise as awakening. Cause and effect. So we're practicing the causes. But if you practice the results, since it's actually valid, it's true that we are Buddhas right now, you visualize yourself as a Buddha, you're practicing the results sort of ahead of the game. That's why it's faster. Because rather than it unfolding, you're sort of jumping there in a way. Although it can seem artificial, it doesn't matter. That's just where we're starting because our habit is so great. So how wonderful is that? So the two together. The Dalai Lama said one practices the Tantra, not because one wants to get enlightened quickly, but because one wants to save sentient beings quickly. It just turns everything upside down, our ordinary conceptions, our ordinary appearances. And so, of course, people should be encouraged in this, because the other thing is you can read these and the instructions and the discussions are so sort of high and elevated that people can actually get discouraged from it. It's kind of similar as you when you first meditate, and I don't know what people are expecting, but they're often overwhelmed by just the torrent of unnecessary thought and thoughts and obstacles and problems, and all these things come up. And this can be really discouraging for people. Sometimes people just give it up. They think that there's something wrong with themselves or something, or that these things are beyond them. But truly, it's not like that. It's like I think it's like, throwing throwing darts at the target. You miss 10,000 times, but one time it hits. Those 10,000 were necessary. They weren't wasted. So now it just turns the whole living experience onto the path. And of course, that's pure vision, pure appearances, the pure land. A Zen master said, this very body, the body of Buddha, this very world, the Pure Land. And that's out of his great realization. He didn't practice the Tantra. So we're sort of jumping there with the faith that this is actually valid for sure. And of course, you couldn't find yourself in this situation if you didn't have the requisite faith for that. I always think to myself, like, really, what's the alternative? We used to joke about that bumper sticker that was floating around in the 60s. I'm such an old fart, I can't believe it, but around in the 60s, that bumper sticker that said, "He who dies with the most stuff wins." That's the alternative. That's not going to work. My concept is elevated enough that I can see the falsity in that. I can also see the power in it, though. You know what I mean? You get a new phone. Whatever. All right, so this is just a little taste of the Tantra, because I think it's important to understand in these 6 Bardos, the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Again, it's this method for being right there when you die. Even in the sutra teachings, I shouldn't say even in the sutra teachings, but in the Pure Land teachings of the sutra, people are repeating Amitabha's name or Amitabha's mantra, all these practices centering on Amitabha and Amitayos. And they're reciting them sometimes just simply again and again and again for their whole life. And the teachings are that at death, it's like all of that merit, all of that power, because suddenly the body is dissolving. What's left is this mind force, and it's just so much more powerful than the distractions of our ordinary existence. And we know that. We sit down to meditate, and I'm just thinking, oh my, I've got an itch in my hair. Oh my knees are hurting. I mean, we're just so distracted. We live in distraction. And of course, it's our habit to live in distraction and play with distraction. So we're really kind of going upstream, Sometimes I think of it as it's like, it's said in the, if I can remember it now, my old mind is forgetting it. A quote from Lankavatara, I'll remember it next week. But what strikes me is that the whole world is running towards happiness. And through their limited vision and the friends around them, traditions, whatever, they all believe that happiness is found at the North Pole. And so they're all running north. And then there's the person that suddenly comes to some sort of profound understanding, even just conceptually, something, turning about in the deepest seat of the mind. That's the quote from Lankavatara. It's a turning about in the deepest seat of the mind. And suddenly you realize there's just a turning about. And you realize that happiness is at the South Pole. Everybody's going against you, it seems. But this is realizing that happiness is not just somehow getting to some sort of ecstatic state yourself, but liberating sentient beings. It's like upside down. It's at the South Pole, not at the North Pole. All of us, that's why we're here. And so there's something that's very sort of dissident about it. I don't mean that in a political way, but there's something that, it's just easy to titillate society, do the things that society likes. But this is really what society wants. So, extremely fortunate and extremely wonderful that these can be practiced. And even the great masters, you read about their experience, the amount of time that they were meditating and involved in these teachings and thinking about it and practicing during their activities and, without ceaseless. It's that continuity. And you read, I think it was Jamgon Khantrul who, had this vision of this mischievous, like 16-year-old girl on the other side of a river, all dressed in white. And he didn't recognize her, but later realized it was Tara. And I can't remember what the story was, what the interactions were. But what I mean is that it's not necessarily like you read in the books. And these are great masters. And so too for us, we should never, one of the tantric vows, I think, is to not discourage, to not be discouraged. Because the rarity, if you think about it, just in terms of scientific numbers, of finding yourself in this situation, exposed to these teachings. So, like in the sutra, the moment of death is extremely propitious, more so the tantra. So we have this incredible thing where we're armed with these teachings. It's like you know what to do instead of just being completely lost and fearful. Okay, so sorry I rambled on and on and on, but I thought it might be good to touch on that a little bit because we throw these terms around and we don't really think about what's going on. The power of using this sense that we have as being a separate being, but now suddenly as a Buddha, and your natural qualities, radiate. Okay, any questions? Again. Yeah.
I just asked if Frank could possibly go through the 4 purities again.
Yeah, let's get that. Purity of environment, purity of the body, purity of enjoyments, and purities of the activities of the Buddha. And these were new to me. These are teachings from what's called the second turning of the wheels. This is a Geshe who's talking. Normally in the Nyingma and the Kagyu, you hear about the 5 certainties, which I think are similar. The 5 certainties are, yes, I'm a Buddha. All my compatriots are high-level bodhisattvas. The teacher is a Buddha. All the compatriots are bodhisattvas. The place is a pure land. The teachings are the highest Vajrayana. And did I say pure land? The environment is a pure land. Pure land 1, being teacher, beings, pure land, teachings. Well, I'm getting old. We'll get it next time. Those are the 5 certainties. You can Google those. And yeah, the 5 certainties. And that is actually bodhicitta in the tantric way. So bodhicitta is expressed as bodhicitta is, in pure vision, the 5 certainties. Kind of mind-boggling, isn't it? Okay. Yeah. Rogo.
Okay. Could you continue to explain, speak about more, why ordinary appearances are so detrimental to going forward into a higher state of being?
Because they're limiting. And because they actually are the residue of our acting purely through our afflictions.
That makes sense. The karma. Right.
So yeah, we're acting out of our emotions, and it's just like, if you're really angry, you're just seeing the objects of your hatred, really, blind with anger, we say. Or if you're really desirous, we know all the mistakes that come from that. You see another human being. And he or she
Yeah.
just
I know.
appears like a goddess or a god.
They're sitting next to me.
Right?
Okay.
But then the relationship starts, everything changes.
Yeah, infatuation lasts 2 days, 2 months, or 2 years, and it's gone. And it's just you and their breathing, right?
Right.
I know. And then real love comes, of course.
So, in other words, we've seen everything through this lens of self-grasping.
Lens of self-grasping, yes.
What have you done for me lately? You know what I mean? I mean, appearances, right? So, and that actually creates
Of course, yeah,
the,
of
the
course, yeah.
limited
What you think
effect.
about becomes
Yeah.
real
And,
again.
and because it appears to us as that way, that's reality.
Right.
And because we get 3 billion, 7 billion people seeing it the same way, same karmic level, wow, that really reinforces. It's got to be
Yeah.
this way.
All right. So, being that that's the case,
Yeah.
should I be imagining continuously that I'm, like I love the example you gave me many years ago, Frank, that when I'm in the shower, is it boiling lava or blood or pus coming out of there, or is it water, or is it ambrosia? Of
Right.
the elixir of life coming out of
Right.
the shower head, and I've never forgotten. So should I just be imagining all day long?
I mean, that's pure vision.
Yeah.
And it also has a natural humility because we see, this is what I love about it.
Yeah.
Because, conceptual, if people don't have anything, any form, like that letter hung,
Right.
to say Dharmakaya, it's a nice, sounds great, It really resonates well in universities and everybody's lost in their
Yeah.
concepts, right? But with the letter hung, it becomes real. And there's so, I don't know that there's so many people, but there are a lot of people who are completely confused. Yeah, they may even have some valid realization, like partial realization. And if you don't have the teachings and you hear like what Buddhahood is like, those teachings are great because you realize, oh my goodness, there's farther to go, so to speak. And similarly, I mean, talk about this direct method of Guru Yoga. I mean, again, for all of us, whatever degree of faith someone has, to have contact with Garchen Rinpoche. And whether you read part of his book or you see the interactions with him or when he's giving teachings, I mean, you just realize, no matter how much arrogance you have, it's not 100% arrogant because you realize, oh my goodness, there's so much more to know and to realize. I mean, I'm trying to imagine myself 19 years in a Chinese prison camp. What would I be like if I came out?
Bitter?
Yeah. Exactly.
Probably not, Frank. I see you as much more than that. You're probably like, oh,
Well, if
forgive
there's anything
everyone.
there, it's because of meeting someone like that. Because
Right.
it immediately opens you up. That humility is an opening thing. Instead of, that example, forgive me for repeating this one if it was too recent, but this teaching of a I think it was a government official. I mean, it was a samurai. Yeah, I mean, very proud and very accomplished, meeting the master, and very Japanese and formal and everything. And the attendant comes in and is going to pour tea, and they each have a little, pouring the tea. And the master said, "I'll pour the tea." So he's going to pour the tea to his guest, right? And he's pouring, pouring, pouring. Fills, just keeps pouring, overflowing, overflowing. The samurai, perfect etiquette and everything, you can't, but suddenly he can't stand it. And he just says, "Stop, stop. There's no more room in the cup." And the master says, "Just like your mind, so full of opinions, everything, there's no room. You have to empty the cup." And that's us. That's the great renunciation. And for some people, it comes through, like personal failure, tragedy, all the things that have gone wrong. And it can just be not really so much going wrong, but all our castles in the sky of how it's supposed to be, what I'm going to, all of that stuff. And when you see the unreality of it, and yet you've been clinging to it, you fall a long way, although your feet have always been on the ground.
Right. I have to say, I am very blessed to have had such failure and misery.
Right. It transforms everything.
It really has.
transforms
It really,
everything.
really is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
My
anyway,
stuff
but
does
that's,
stink really
yeah,
badly.
ordinary appearances. It said the other thing that they give the example is that it's like you had a wooden box, and you had a cloth, a cloth that's soaked in perfume. And you put that cloth is our kleshas, our afflictions, the poisonous emotions, mind states, and that's in this box. And when you purify the kleshas, you take the cloth out of the box, but the perfume smell remains. That's appearances. So that's what's so powerful about it. And that's why we work on the conceptions more easily than the appearances, because that lingers. I mean, you're at whatever level on the great bodhisattva bhumis, it's still lingering there. This seems real. But concepts.
Thank you, Frank.
Yeah.
That was well said.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Anyone else?
All
Going
right.
once? Steffi.
Steffi.
You mentioned the tantric vows. Have we taken those here?
Mm-hmm.
We have.
When Vajraklaya, when Lama Abu comes,
We do those?
they insert it with the 14 tantric vows.
Oh, I thought that was called like the 14 downfalls.
Root
or
downfalls.
something.
Yeah.
That's the same thing?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm glad I know what's going on.
Well, it might be that I don't know what's going on. I got that throwing words around. Yeah. 14. Start with 14, then you can worry. Right? Yeah, right. Right. You get it in small doses. All right. It's good. Okay. Okay. All right. We dedicate this evening to all motherly sentient beings. May each and every one of them be freed from the iron chains of self-grasping. May each and every one of them commit themselves to the liberation of all until everyone is free. Swaha. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Let her hung. And next time out of